And if we can get water into public ownership, then we can get energy, then we can get housing, then we can get education, and we can go on and on and on. Water is where ecology, climate, and class all come together.
Good neighbour.
A few years ago, I was acquitted for breaking some windows in a protest, and I spoke to Clive, and he said, why don't you come to Parliament and we can have a pint in the Strangers Bar, because that will probably really annoy quite a lot of people. So that's the kind of guy he is. Please welcome to the stage, Clive Lewis.
Can you quickly explain what the Strangers Bar is?
Yeah, that's where people go to get themselves in the papers for drinking too much cheap beer. It's MPs and staff, so mainly MPs, but staff and guests. So staff can go in there on Thursday and Fridays on their own, but MPs get priority and can only go in there on Monday to Wednesday, sitting days. I don't think it's that cheap. I mean, if you come from up north, anyone from up north? Yeah, it's not that cheap. Still £7 a pint, but it is theoretically subsidised.
Subsidised.
But you took Clare in there to parade her around in front of the politicians to be like...
She paraded herself. She didn't need me. She didn't need me to do that. Yeah, she was like, "Oi, you! Oi, I know you." So,
It was very kind of you to buy me a pint.
Thank you. Lovely to see everyone, by the way. Having a great WOMAD? Good. My first one. Be kind. Be gentle. I feel like the kind of...
You've still got your bag on, Clive.
Oh, right, sorry. I feel like kind of... what's the guy... What do you call someone that comes after? Like a post fluffer for Zach? I'm not sure. So, yeah. But yeah, there you go.
So, into our questions for you. You've got a new boss.
Yeah.
What's the goss? Tell us about
Well,
him.
you saw the thing out there. There's a poster out there, and it says Clive Lewis, a massive supporter of Andy Burnham. I'd like to clarify that. We supported Andy because Andy talked about ending neoliberalism, something some of us have been talking about for quite a while. Jury's out on that, but we'll see. I mean, I'm unclear. John Healey isn't the person I'd have put in number 11 if he wanted to end neoliberalism, but who am I? We shall see. Basically, I would have given my left testicle to have Andy Burnham and have got rid of Starmer, or McSweeney and Starmer and that cabal, and have someone who's basically said, I'm not going to kick you out of the party or the PLP simply for voting with your conscience. That's a material improvement, and I'm very happy that we now have a better political culture inside the Labour Party. That's good. But that's about as good as it gets at the moment. We will see. There is no one from the broad left inside the Parliamentary Labour Party who has been put on the front bench. So that will have escaped most people, but there is no one from the broad left who has been put onto the front bench. Now, when Andy talks about building a broad party of all the talents and all the wings, it's not quite true. The left, and that's about, I'd say, 50 plus MPs, those who voted consistently against the nefarious immigration and asylum policies and those who voted against the welfare bill at both votes, there are about 50 MPs, none of them, or virtually none of them, a couple of PPSs, parliamentary private secretaries, it's kind of the lowest rung of the front bench ladder. With the exception of that, none of them are in ministerial or cabinet positions. So I think that tells you a lot. It's still quite sectarian. You know, clearly there's space on there for West Streeting. You know, the man that basically brought Palantir into the NHS. There's space for him, but there's no space for those of us who think that's a jolly bad idea.
Yeah.
So I think, let's see where Andy goes. I want him to do well because the stakes are so high. People who think Nigel Farage is finished, and we might come on to that in a little bit, but people who do, you mistake. You're mistaken. He isn't down and out. He's taken a bit of a hit. He will be back. And if it's not him, it will be someone else. What you're seeing at the moment, and one of the things that Zach didn't explain, I don't think, when I listened to him, when he was talking about Nigel Farage, were the material conditions which make Nigel Farage possible. And that is the fact that the ruling capitalist class in this country are hedging their bets. And at the moment, because of the 5 million and other things that have happened, they don't know whether to hedge their bets with Kemi or with him. And so the jury's out at the moment. They will get behind whoever brings in the most tax-reducing, deregulating, anti-climate, pro-oil, big business agenda possible. And by threatening Leveson, he's kind of, I think, damaged himself, frankly. So I think, there's a lot to play for. I want to see a Labour government, and we could be coming in for an early election, but I want to see a Labour government that genuinely takes apart neoliberalism. But what do you replace it with? But I would argue socialism. But let's see where we land.
Thanks very much. Well, so one of the things that you probably do have to replace it with is like much more empowerment for much more people. So I know that you helped us to host a roundtable focusing on what can be done to build bottom-up neighbourhood governance, because a lot of people don't know that the new English devolution bill that's been passed and has gone into an act is, it says that local authorities have to make some affordance for neighbourhood level governance. And then, of course, because that just sounds good, there's no description of what that actually is. And given that we don't really have very good neighbourhood level governance in this country, it seems like that's an open space. And Andy's making kind of all the right noises to suggest that he believes that actually what we think should happen. And obviously that's to be, found out how that plays out. But can you tell us a bit about that situation?
Well, yeah, I mean, I sound particularly pessimistic, and that's unlike me. But look, what Andy is talking about, he's talking about devolution, and he's talking about, he's got number 10 North, and he's pushing power out to the nations and regions. And he's getting really excited about this. But unless I'm mistaken, I don't think anyone else is. I mean, people are like, okay, this looks different. This sounds interesting. But no one's getting excited about it. Why aren't people getting excited about it? Because we don't know where that power is going to go. We can kind of assume, given the kind of trajectory that most post-war governments post kind of 1979 have been on, we can kind of assume that if it goes to mayors and if it goes to strategic authorities like Andy, then what you're going to see is these increasingly powerful governor-type personalities. But if Andy Burnham said, I'm going to devolve power, and I'm not just going to devolve it to mayors, I'm not just going to devolve it to strategic authorities, I'm going to devolve it to people and communities. We are going to have regional assemblies in every region, so that we're going to get rid of the Lords, and the second chamber will be in your region. You will have tax-raising powers, and in your own assembly, we will make sure through legislation that you give more power, push power down to communities in the way that we've been discussing with the community organisers, but also with citizens' assemblies. This is something which Parliament is quite hostile to. When I was putting forward my public ownership bid on water 18 months ago, the line that the whips took was, we can't attack Clive. And I know the briefing because I was told, we can't attack Clive's bill because he's asking for public ownership, because most of the country think water should be publicly owned, okay? Yes. It's not rocket science. So we'll attack him on the democracy angle. This mad idea that citizens' assemblies might possibly have a better idea about how to distribute power and what to do with water than Parliament. And so my colleagues were standing up and saying, we don't need a citizens' assembly, we are the people's assembly. Well, my God, listen to yourselves. Look at how unpopular mainstream politics is at the moment, because it isn't dealing with the issues that affect people's lives, and it isn't dealing with the fact that power has been stripped away, not just from communities, but from institutions. Look at trade unions as an example. You used to go into work and you used to be able to stand up to the boss or the corporation and demand pay, demand rights at work, stand up to them. But that's been emaciated, it's been taken away. Controlling your lives from how you rent your home. You don't rent it from a local authority that's democratically decided. You rent it from a billionaire or from a corporation or from a private landlord who doesn't have to do very much in terms of listen to you. So people have had power stripped away from them. And one of the things that Andy needs to do, if he wants to get people excited about devolution, is explain where is that power going to. People don't just want it going to another opaque institution or some powerful individual like a mayor or so on, who may or may not do good, who may or may not push power down. So I think that's the missing ingredient from his devolution programme.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And going on to the water thing that you've just mentioned, because we do have a shitty water crisis, did you know that earlier this week, Matthew Wright, the former Southern Water boss, has been charged with allegedly planning to manipulate the water testing and lie to Ofwat and the public about the quality of the water they treat? And obviously, our friends at the Citizens Arrest Network have been out doing citizens arrests on water bosses, been extremely popular across the political spectrum, and in all parts of the media they had a very warm reception because people are so absolutely sick of the state of this sort of individual, sort of non-accountable corporate kind of problem. So can you tell us about about your water plans? How's that going?
Team you up nicely there, thank you. So look, for 30 years, when water was privatised, we paid them billions. They got a bonus to take this asset and to run it. And I'm not sure whether you're aware of just how terrible the track record of private water is. But over the last 35 years, they've sold many of the assets off. So we've sold around about 30 or 35 reservoirs in the United Kingdom. And we haven't built a single one under privatisation. There's not one been built. Some are now underway, but not one's been built. In terms of the leaks and and fixing the infrastructure, well, bits of that have happened, but most of it has been left to rot. You probably see that from the leaks in the road that come up every few months where you live. And we know that billions of litres of water, are being wasted in the middle of a heat wave. And we know there's going to be 5 billion litre shortfall of water every year in the next 5 to 10 years. So basically this country is going to go from a water abundant country to a country which has water shortages on a regular basis. And that's before you start talking about data centres, okay? So that's where we are with water. But what they've done, not only were they paid billions, not only have they not put a penny of their own private equity into the water infrastructure, which was what was promised would happen, they've taken your bills and they've paid around between 60 and 70 billion pounds in share payments out to shareholders. They've made profit. They've extracted that wealth, mainly from the bills that you've paid by not putting that into the infrastructure. But here's the real kind of clincher. If you still think, well, you know, they're shareholders, they've taken a risk, maybe they need to have a return. Okay, let's park that. Around about 70 to 80 billion pounds, maybe more, has been sweated from the assets. So they've created shell companies and they've borrowed against our water infrastructure, and they've raised another 70, 80 billion pounds that they've paid out in dividend payments and interest payments. So what's in effect happened is, over the last 35 years, they've sucked out vast wealth, vast resource, and put very little back in. And now your bills in the next 2 years will have gone up by, on average, 35%. And you may not know this, but Ofwat is just about to come to its conclusion on what the bill should go up again for the next period. And it's likely to go up. It could be as much as 35% again, or possibly more. So that's where we are. So in effect, what they've been doing is they've been pissing on our heads and telling us it's raining. Well, I think now most people know that they're just pissing on our heads, and they're saying, yeah, actually, we are. But what's anyone going to do about it? And you've got successive governments who completely refuse to accept that one of the most critical resources in this country, you can't reindustrialize, you can't have data centers, you can't have food security, you can't have clean beaches and rivers, you can't have a functioning ecosystem on our rivers and within this country without public ownership of water, because whilst it's owned by private interests, they will milk and extract every single penny they can. And ultimately, we know the research shows that when people know they own water, when that's your resource, people conserve water far more effectively. That's been shown internationally. So we're an outlier. Literally no other country in the world, not even the US, has private equity, private companies running such a critical piece of infrastructure. And the final thing I will say is, when I was standing up and going toe-to-toe with Steve Reed over this issue when he was Secretary of State for DEFRA, and he's on the right of the party, even to the, on the kind of quite far right of the party. And I said to him, we need public ownership of water. And he stood up and he said, oh, well, my colleague, I'm more interested in the purity of our water than I am in the purity of our ideology. And I can't answer back after I've asked my first question. But what that demonstrates to you is the number of frontline, front-rank politicians who think that the privatized ownership of key assets within our society isn't ideological. That's hegemony. That is that they think that is the natural order of things, that this is how it will always be. That's the only thing that works. And he actually believed that. So it tells you how much our political class has been, frankly, corrupted and co-opted into this way of thinking. And it's for the public to let them know that when it comes to something like water, your children can't swim in the river next to you. You can't go into a river because you don't know whether it's going to be contaminated with pollutants and contaminants. You can't go into the sea without looking at an app because you don't know whether there's going to be turds floating in the water when you go surfing or swimming. What has it come to that this has happened? So for me, water is the cutting edge of all that has gone wrong within our democracy and our society over the last 50 years. And it tells you everything about the kind of economy we've created. And if we can get water into public ownership, then we can get energy, then we can get housing, then we can get education, and we can go on and on and on. Water is where ecology, climate, and class all come together. Everyone knows that water is something that should be publicly owned, 85%. So, that's why it's really, really important. That's why we chose it.